This is episode 93 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And my interviewee is Cathy Weiss, and we'll talk about energy flows and yoga. Let's listen. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is Stephanie Cunningham, and my guest today is Cathy Weiss. Cathy is a naturally gifted healer, clairvoyant, energy channel. She's also an experienced certified yoga instructor. She's been teaching yoga to individuals and groups since 2006 and is now providing intuitive energy reading and healing sessions. She's passionate about meeting you where you are and empowering your wellness and soul-centered life. She incorporates the wisdom of subtle body energy, the energy of the season, and her gifts as an intuitive energy healer to create yoga sequences for women that are energetically aligned. So welcome, Cathy. I have had no one that's even close to what you're going to talk about, so it should be really, really interesting today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today, Stephanie. I'm super excited to be here, and it's always really fun for me to sort of bring a new light for people into their yoga practice or into just their day-to-day life around energy and the seasons if it's something that they're not familiar with. So I feel like I just want to tell people to hang on. Give us a listen. I'm going to make sure to break it down in a way that is really understandable, and hopefully everybody who's listening will be able to walk away with one or two things that they can implement in their life or their yoga practice right away.
Great. Okay. One of the things that you've said in your intro here is that one of the topics we might talk about, and since I know nothing about it, I will say exactly what you've said, which is understanding the energetic seasons and simple tips to optimize personal energy via your yoga practice all year long. So let's talk about energetic seasons just to start off.
Absolutely. That's a really great place to start. The thing that can trip people up is that on the calendar, we have 4 seasons, right? We've got spring, summer, winter, and fall. And you and I are speaking to each other from opposite sides of the planet. So for me right now, we're sliding into spring, which means that you are starting to slide into fall.
Correct.
So I'll keep that in mind as I talk about the energetic seasons, because there are only 3 energetic seasons. And so they sort of bleed a little bit and don't line up with the calendar. So since you're in Australia, and I'm going to talk to people a little bit more in the southern hemisphere, because that is most likely where most of the people listening are coming from today. But I will not leave my friends in the northern hemisphere behind.
Cathy?
Yes.
Most of my listeners are in the northern hemisphere.
Oh, you're kidding. Well, guess what? Then it's going to be good for everybody. Okay. I'm going to make sure we get us all in there. But since I jumped in so eagerly with the southern hemisphere, we'll start there, and then I'll flip it to the northern hemisphere. As we're moving into fall, we're going to talk about really more like mid to late fall, all the way through almost the end of winter is a season called Vata. And Vata is a cold season. There's a lot of wind, movement, air, and change. And as we harness that energy, it's a really great time for us to look at our creative selves. So it's about, what do we want to create in the later seasons? If you're someone who is a business owner, for example, it might be like, what new offerings am I going to create for my customers in your life? Maybe it's like, what travel do I want to take next year? Or what new thing do I want to explore or learn? And when Vata gets unbalanced, we tend to get really anxious. So we get anxiety, we get nervous, we get airheaded, so we get really forgetful. And in our yoga practice, we want to almost counteract that, like lots of movement, change, nervous energy by getting really still and getting really grounded. So in that season, when it is for you, whether you're, northern hemisphere or southern, when for you, you're in late fall all the way through late winter or potentially early spring even, you want a yoga practice that is not quite so much of a jump around, super fast-paced vinyasa practice. You want something that moves a little bit slower and has a strong focus and emphasis on longer held standing poses and longer held seated postures. And that's just a really simple basic. There's some other things we can do in the yoga practice with our breath and our mind, but for someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of knowledge or experience, the real key with that energy is get still. Get into your pose and hold it. So that's late fall into late winter, early spring. So this is great because that's where we are here in the northern hemisphere, right? So people in southern hemisphere are moving into Vata, and us in the northern hemisphere are starting to move out of Vata into the next energetic season, which is Kapha. And Kapha is going to take us from either late winter or early spring. And some of this is location dependent. And that's going to take us all the way into early to midsummer, again, when we get like a little bit of a weather shift. And Kapha is slow, it's heavy, it's moist, it's warmer than Vata, but it's not hot. It's kind of like temperate, and like the image of mud and the feeling. The Kapha time is really great for like show up and get things done. It's about like doing the work day to day. Keep showing up, keep doing it, keep like not plodding along, but keep plugging away at those goals and things that in the Vata time when you're getting creative and like, where am I going? Kapha is all about step by step getting there. Go there. Do the work that you need to do to get to the finish line that you created for yourself. So with this image of mud, we can start to feel that feeling of like getting stuck or sucked down into the mud. And if it's not in balance, we can feel depressed or like there's something wrong with us and we can't do anything right. And so we want to sort of combat that or balance it out with things that are more uplifting. So in a yoga practice, things that are uplifting can be as simple as side bending postures, even just standing upright and leaning over to one side and the other. Inversions, like a handstand or a forearm stand, if that's part of your practice. If that's too intense, even legs up the wall has the benefits of an inversion. And starting to move around, but not like super fast. Again, not like way super fast flowy yoga, but something with like a nice medium, moderate pace. Maybe there's a few sun salutations and some held postures, kind of like middle of the road. After Kapha will come pitta. And pitta is the season from, again, anywhere from early to midsummer through early fall when we bump back up against Vata where we started. And pitta is hot and it's fiery and it's fast paced and it's productive and it's exciting and it's energetic. And it's usually the time of year when most people are going to feel really great and they're really active and they're getting a lot done and they're seeing the results of that showing up day to day, right? And like doing the work. That's when like, it's like we're reaping all of the benefits. And so there's a lot of more joy and a lot more like I'm doing all the things and it's kind of more fun for people. But again, like the other two seasons, it can get out of balance. And when it's out of balance, we start to get hot and bothered, short-tempered, angry. We kind of want to lash out at people. And instead of like in Kapha, where we think everything's our fault and what's wrong with us, in Pitta, everything is your fault and you did it wrong. And it's all like, you're the bad guy over here, not me. And so this is when we want to look at like cooling ourselves down through our yoga practice. So it's nice time of year to take advantage of the heat. So I think of a Pitta time of year, really great yoga practice is to go ahead and do like a fun, faster paced, more vinyasa-y flow to start with, and then come into these like really yummy, deep, long held, stretchy poses, like long held forward folds or long held seated twists, or even like a nice longer held back bending sequence, as long as it's balanced with some forward folds, so that we're like cooling down and soothing the fire so it doesn't like burn us up from the inside. And again, these are just like some really quick, basic, simple tips. There are other things that we can do and incorporate. And that's where if somebody is interested, they would want to find an instructor, or they can even reach out and talk to me about some other specific like breath work or things we can do with the mind to help with the physical practice. But that's kind of like, in a little tiny nutshell, the 3 energetic seasons and ways that yoga can support the energy of each of those seasons.
Okay, great. Obviously, as a yoga teacher, and I'm sure all of my listeners have heard of the Vata, Pitta, Kapha, but I never put it to the energetic level of seasons, and I think that's really an interesting way to think about it.
Yes.
But how you say that you had a master's degree in education, so you've obviously taught, and then you are a certified yoga instructor, and now you say you're a naturally gifted healer, but you've only added this last year to what you offer. So how did that come about?
Such a fun story that I love to tell. So thank you so much for asking. I have known that I was able to work with energy for probably a little over 10 years now. I was in actually a therapeutic yoga teacher training course, and the instructors, amongst other things, they were teaching us how to like run energy and pull energy. And it was nothing that I had ever been taught before. But for me, that moment was the same as being like told, here's how you do triangle pose. And I was like, oh, okay, great. I can do triangle pose. I was like, here is how you work with someone's energy. And I was like, oh, okay, great. I can do this. Whatever. It was just like supernatural to me, to the point where I was like, what, other people can't do this or don't know how to do this? Like, it just,
yes.
to me, it was as simple and such a part of myself as anything else. But I also had never been exposed to it before. I didn't have any friends in my life. I didn't really have anyone that I could talk to about it. And so it was just kind of something that I kept to myself. I knew I could do, and I would occasionally sneak it into my group yoga classes. And people were always like, oh my God, that class was amazing. What did you do? And I was like, I don't know. I just taught yoga. I wasn't like really telling them about it. But gradually I did develop a friendship with one person who is a Reiki practitioner, and she also did oracle card readings, and she's an incredible gift for speaking with spirit guides and things like that. And she was the only person I would talk to, because it was still sort of like weird, or like nobody's going to believe me type of a thing. And this is sort of like in conjunction with Long Island Medium coming out. I don't know if you guys have that show.
I don't think so. I don't have a TV, so I'm not
okay, so you don't even know.
Yeah.
There is a program about a woman who lives in Long Island here in the States, who is a medium, which is not what I do, but it was still sort of like opening my eyes to the fact that other people do have these types of gifts, and that they're normal and they can be utilized for really positive things. But I was still like, pretty much keeping it to myself. On occasion, I would, to a friend or something, say like, hey, I'm feeling this in your energy, and so I did this for you. And they would be like, great. And nobody was ever like, you're weird, whatever, Cathy. Like, everybody just kind of knew that was a part of me, even though I sort of like wasn't overt about it. So my friend Lindsay, who is the one friend I could speak to about it, we were on a phone conversation. I was having a really terrible day where I had lost this publishing contest. I had written a memoir and entered it into a contest to win a publishing contract. And I was utilizing all of my energetic skills with law of attraction, and like visualizing the winning moment, and also visualizing what would happen afterwards, and like really feeling it in my whole body. And so I was absolutely certain that I was going to win this contest. And the day they announced the winners, it was not me. And I was just like so crushed and so frustrated, and didn't understand, like, I did all that law of attraction work, stupid, blah, and like all mad about it. So we were talking, and we had a great conversation. At the end of the conversation, she said, I'm going to send you this deck of oracle cards. Great. Awesome. A couple days later, the deck of cards arrives in the mail. And as I opened it up and touched the box, I heard loud and clear in my mind, you have to do this for other people. And I was like, okay. And I've had enough experience with that intuitive voice to know to trust and follow it, even if it doesn't make sense. So I just kind of threw out on Facebook. This was in December of 2017. I just kind of threw it out there like, hey, do any of my friends want an oracle card reading? I'm just going to like practice for my free treat for you. And I had a couple of people say yes, and I started practicing, and I quickly realized I wasn't reading the oracle cards. I was reading their energy and receiving healing messages and practical, simple to-do guidance that they could follow, and that the oracle cards were just sort of like the icing on top. They made it fun and interesting and helped both myself and the person I was working with tap into intuition a little deeper, or think about their situation in maybe a different light or from a different perspective. But that really and truly what I was doing was working with people's energy and receiving messages from source energy, sometimes their spirit guides, occasionally a loved one who has passed, which is what a medium does. That's not my forte, and that generally only arises if it's really meaningful and going to help the person in the present moment. So that's kind of what happened. It was like the universe just sort of said, it's time for you to do this, and I agreed and went along with it. So here we are now having this conversation.
True. So really it started when you were taking yoga therapy training.
Yes.
I didn't realize that, it's my ignorance really, that would be included in the yoga therapy training. I mean, obviously reading people's energy is something you do, well, probably almost anytime you teach anybody anything really, to kind of figure out how it's going over. But to actually add that to your yoga class, what does that, can you give me an example of that, of how you might read the class or perhaps read an individual and then work on the energy part of that also?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us and for everybody who's listening to understand what we mean when we say their energy, because there is individual energy and there's collective energy. So we each have an electromagnetic vibration. And this is a byproduct of not only like how much sleep we had or what kind of food we ate, but also even the way that we're breathing, the emotions we're experiencing, and the thoughts that we're thinking. And those are, especially the thoughts, are electrical currents that travels in a wave. And those electrical currents not only travel through your body, but create a vibration that extends away from the physical body. Science at this point can measure that vibration up to 5 feet away from you. That doesn't mean that that vibration ends there. That's just sort of where technology is meeting us right now. But like the ripple in a pond, that wave of energy or vibration is going to continue to travel away from you. The waves are going to get smaller and softer and dimmer, but they do continue to extend. So for me, I have the gift of being highly sensitive, which means that I can feel that vibration more strongly than other people in close proximity. And I can also feel those vibrations across greater distances than most people. So only about 20% of the population has the gift of high sensitivity. So many of us maybe have never even met a single person who has that. So it can be a little bit hard to like conceptualize. So when I'm working either with an individual or a group, I just feel what they're feeling, and sometimes I will get an image in my mind based off of that information, which is called clairvoyance, by the way, which is what that is. Or I sometimes hear words and phrases, which is called clairaudience. And sometimes I just have a moment of knowing what this person needs. And that's more of just what we would call like being intuitive. I don't know where it comes from, or like I'm not having a conscious thought like, gosh, if that person moved their foot 2 inches to the right, they would feel amazing. It's like, I just know that's what needs to happen. Or I just know I need to like completely change the course of the direction of the class. So as I'm feeling and taking in that information, I can tell someone in the present moment that very next thing that they need to do to feel better or move forward or create new momentum in their life. So in a yoga class, it could be as simple as changing postures, or me recognizing the sequence I have planned is the incorrect sequence and I'm going to really rapidly change it to something else. Or if I'm working with a one-on-one client, it might be like, what you really need to do is start swimming once a week, or what you really need to do is like start considering a different career, or whatever. It's so individualized that I couldn't give you all the examples, but it really is just based off of their vibrations. And a lot of them are subconscious. Like people are like, no, I'm thinking this through, but we forget we've got the subconscious thoughts that are also creating vibrations. And I'm picking up on that often as well.
Okay. I'm trying to understand where a really good teacher who's reading her class is different from this intuitive level that you are using. I just don't know. Is it kind of like a blending somehow, a really good teacher who's lots of experience and knows how to read a class is really close to someone who's intuitively reading that class?
Yes, absolutely. Because they're in any industry, when you've been doing something for a long time, it becomes almost like a second nature. And so definitely someone who has a lot of experience with teaching classes of yoga is going to be picking up on that. And they might even be doing some of it intuitively without having that language or awareness of that's what's happening. And those are usually the classes that we walk away from as students where we're like, wow, that was exactly what I needed. Or like, it was like the teacher was reading my mind. So, and absolutely that is happening. And I would put money on it that there is some energetic awareness and some intuitive stuff going on, even if that instructor doesn't call it that. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And then just with me, because I do have a little bit of a heightened or a higher ability to do that, I will even sometimes like pull direct words out of people's minds and they'll be like, I literally just thought that. And I'm like, and I just literally said it right back to you. So I might just be able to do that with a little bit more sharpness or acuteness or awareness that is exactly what I'm doing in the moment.
Okay. That sounds good. I understand what you're talking about. I really do. And you said that you didn't have anybody to talk to about it. Do you ever feel that it's kind of out there and that's why you'd rather keep it to people that might understand it? But being on podcast, you're obviously willing to talk about it now.
Yeah, I'm out of the closet now.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely. Okay. And that's what I called it at some point in 2018. I was like, I'm coming out of the closet that I'm a light worker. Though using the word clairvoyant at this point has barely been about a year. And the first time someone said it to me, she said, oh, you're clairvoyant. And I was like, that is weird. That there's no such thing. I don't know what you're talking about. And I had to really like research it and understand the term to go like, oh. And it felt like such a relief to actually have the terminology and to have the words and the language to use. So yes, I am 100% out of the closet now. And part of my mission is to help normalize the conversation so that other people start to understand that it isn't weird or out there or supernatural, that there are lots of people who have these types of gifts and that they're very natural and really valuable and can be a really useful tool in our lives. Almost like you would go to see a therapist or your hairdresser or, other people that you consider really necessary or valuable people in your lives. Energy workers can provide similar, really high quality services to help you grow and expand and move forward, whether it is in your yoga practice, if you're fortunate enough to come across someone like me who has both skills, or you work with someone else who is just more about just the energy work. You work with someone on an ongoing basis and it's like the trajectory of your life can just completely take off in a positive new direction. So part of what I'm doing is helping normalize the conversation for other people like me to feel comfortable coming out about their gifts and talents so that they can affect and positively help other people as well.
Great. You have another topic that you thought we could talk about here, which was the power and purpose of self-care, overcoming anxiety with yoga, breath, meditation, and mantra. I think teachers were naturally givers, and sometimes we don't give very much to ourselves. So this might be an excellent thing to talk about for the listeners.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing that came to mind when you brought up that topic, well, number one, I've lived it. I went through a phase several years ago where I was like besieged with anxiety and panic attacks and really just like coming apart at the seams to the point where I was like, oh, I wonder if I need to like take medication or see a therapist. I need to do something because it was getting really detrimental and prohibitive in my life. And so as I was exploring avenues of how I was going to heal myself, I had, again, this moment of insight and this sort of direct knowledge. At that point, I've been doing yoga maybe about 10 years, that yoga had helped me heal in many other ways. And maybe I needed to turn back to my yoga practice, not to just be my workout, but to be something that healed me. And I pulled out all of my books from teacher trainings and even other books that I had, and I really scoured the information for things that would help with anxiety and panic. And I began a physical practice and a breathing practice and a mantra practice pretty much daily for several months. And my anxiety dramatically dropped. And the panic attacks pretty much abated to where it was like once every 6 months and then once every 18 months. And at this point, I can't tell you the last time I had a panic attack. The self-care is also self-discipline, right? I was able to do that, but I also really took charge. And I committed to doing those practices at least 4 times a week for as long as it took, until I felt like I could cut down to 2 times a week, until I felt like I could cut down to 1 time a week. And now it's part like in my maintenance. Like when I start to feel like, oh, I'm getting a little bit anxious or like that's starting to build up, I know that I need to go back to those practices. They're definitely more still. There's no vinyasa at all in an anti-anxiety yoga practice. And it's also not all restorative. And if I could like tell people anything about a yoga practice for anxiety where I get really concerned, is where I see instructors advertising restorative yoga for anxiety. Now, I get it. Anxiety is really exhausting. It makes us very tired, and we want to just lay around and rest. And that rest is valuable, and it is a piece of an anti-anxiety practice. But one of the things with anxiety is that no matter what energetic season we're in, it's a buildup of excess Vata. And so when we go back to the beginning of our conversation where we talked about what reduces Vata or what helps bring us back to balance, is long-held standing postures and long-held seated postures. And those are not a part of a restorative practice. So it's super important, if we're going to be using yoga to reduce anxiety, to really, really carefully look at the sequence and make sure that it does include those 2 pieces. And then it can wrap up with a couple of restorative poses, like maybe 2, 3 tops. And that it doesn't have sun salutations and jumping around, because those exacerbate. So just looking at asana, that is a way that yoga can help support and reduce anxiety. And there's breathing and there's mantra and things like that. It's a little bit more individualized. So I don't want to go into too much detail with those. But again, if you're listening and you're interested, oh my gosh, 100% reach out to me or another instructor who has experience and knowledge in this area. If we want to talk to the instructors about self-care, it really goes back to walking our talk and being self-disciplined. And I sometimes think of yoga as medicine. And there's different medicines for different things. And there are times when we need to adjust like the medicine that we're taking, right? So at that time in my life, several years ago, I really needed to be taking the anti-anxiety flavor of yoga. I'm not really doing it so much right now. I'm doing other things, but it's about really being super aware and knowing that yoga has so many applications and that you're using the right application at the right time for yourself, because you need to be fueling and filling your cup in order to fuel and fill your students' cup. And there are going to be times in your life when you're doing the exact same thing as your students, and there's going to be times in your life where you're not. And you really have to honor where you are and honor where they are, and bring to your students what they need, even if that means you're bringing to yourself and providing yourself with something different.
Okay. I think that's excellent advice. Cathy, we're almost at the end of the podcast. Is there anything that we haven't covered in enough detail or haven't covered at all that you would like to share with the listeners?
Oh gosh, I feel like we could just keep talking about this for days and days and days. It's such an interesting topic of conversation to me. And the fact that I really believe in like walking my talk. And so everything that I'm offering up, I have experienced in my own practice and in my own teaching. So whether you're a teacher or a student and you're feeling curious and you want to know more, come hang out with me on my website, which is Cathy-Weiss.com, or shoot me an email through the contact page and just say, I kind of want to talk to you about this some more. And I would be more than happy to, because what I'm picking up and feeling right now is like, man, there's just so, like, we barely touched on the tip of the iceberg, and it would be fun to get to go deeper with anyone who's interested in going a little bit deeper on this.
Okay, great. I'll say those contact details again. It's Cathy at Cathy and that's WEISS.com. The website is www.cathy-weiss.com. Facebook is Lightworker Cathy Weiss. Instagram is Lightworker_Cathy. And YouTube, Cathy. Yep. Okay. So, well, thank you so much, Cathy. You've really added to the conversation, I think, and I applaud you for coming out of the closet. It's difficult, I think, to be a little bit. People can put labels on things, and sometimes that makes it difficult to have a conversation. So I really appreciate you willing to talk about this and adding this to the podcast.
Thank you, Stephanie. It was absolutely a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thanks.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.